Shalom Aleke, Sodalite, and look at that. I'm like an indigo child, you know. So today I'll be talking about School of Soul, Its Paths and Pitfalls by Z'ev Ben Shimon Halevi. And I would like to say something about this book. In one respect, we are looking at the fact that he refers to Christianity as being founded by Jesus, which isn't actually historical. And this influx of the Kabbalah of the Christians and the idea of Lucifer and Satan as separate, like almost gods that have their role to play, and they're not really. But some of that thought exists in but anyways, we see various diagrams, and these well, I mean, you don't see, not various diagrams. There's only a couple diagrams, and the trees of life, the correspondences, and so it's a pretty good book. He knows his stuff, but it's largely basic, sort of New Age sort of speak. So I'm not being terribly coherent. So let's get into it. I'm going to talk about it in terms of, as I said, the spiritual college, the invisible college, but the outer side of it. So some people, upon hearing about such things like this, want to found their own school. Yes, because people who aren't part of organized religion find even more organized religions to be a part of. And he speaks, they speak of universality, but, the language and the forms of Judaism are, of course, the central thing, and not realizing that some things are termed, but it's for all people. But there's various limits that schools like this don't have to follow. And okay, so we're looking here. Okay, the spiritual work can only go so far. It's something that can be done as a group, something can be done as an individual, but, how do you confirm your experience? Through practice, through involving yourself with others. That's how you confirm your spiritual experiences. Except for his book, the theoretical side of the tradition. And that's the benefit to this book that you don't typically see, is it's about life less than it is about ideas. But like the Golden Dawn, and they're banishing things, and they're breaking up their temple that they psychically built in a place. I don't believe that should be done at all. Just leave it, leave the states. Yeah, you kind of just can go drifting about life. But, Abala is, means direction. It means something passed on. And whether there's a reality to it or something else to it, we're looking at some differences to look into. Natural setting. And so, as opposed to the Christian idea when we look, even if we're looking at the world through a very dry sort of expression of looking at the tree of life and looking at things through terms or as the cube or the square instead of the totality of everything or the real reality behind it, the dot or the dent or the lump in such cube or square. It is God who created nature. And from that, we need to connect our spiritual concepts to. Now, human beings very naturally refer to different orders of society. And these orders of society, naturally hierarchical. Men and women have them. Society of organized religion is just a man thing. Absolutely not. But there can be women's orders, and women's orders may operate differently. Some people say fully spiritual, fully material, in-betweens, and all that sort of stuff. Well, the spiritual realms overlap, and that's probably a better way to think of it. But you can think of the hierarchy. At your feet, you may have mankind. At your knees, you may have civilization. At your left hand, you have the nation. The right hand, the community. The pelvis, the family. The individual, the left elbow. The right elbow, the group. The center of the chest, the school. The line, the tradition, the teaching. And the chain of teaching is important to consider. What lineage are you going to be a part of? And was it, the action, where do things come from in terms of how they connect to one thing and another thing? And it's like I've spoke about Solomonic magic and Moses magic, and I've kind of pointed out that every single grimoire out there, if it is Solomon or Moses, it's not the prophet, it's some rabbi in the medieval times that's saying this stuff, or maybe even as early as the 1st century. The Testament of Abraham. Well, which Abraham? Same thing with the New Testament. Yeah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're not necessarily pseudo-epigraphical. Written by people from 90 of the Common Era to just before 150 are the first dates for the canonical Gospels. So in that case, we're looking at, a Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John who probably didn't even know Paul, let alone Jesus, or anybody that was part of the Jesus character. But it's okay to look at history and say, hey, I don't necessarily accept that this is the situation. Now, the teachings will be lived out differently at different times and different places and among different people. That does not mean that any particular thing is wrong or right. Transmission. So, how does the information come through? Is there divine inspiration, divine revelation, like unto the prophets of God, the Nabiim? Or is it through lineages of their teaching? Is it through other lineages? Did a scholar figure out something or a mystic figure out something and then they put it in? What is the, how is it received? Is it verbal? Is it by touch? How is this information coming through? Levels. Now, I'm going to just more or less ignore what that chapter is saying, and well, no, not really. So there's the book of nature, the book of ourselves, and the revealed book, the actual revealed book, the actual inspired teachings of the prophet of the time and place. But you got the bodily, the mental, and the spiritual. Those are also levels that you can look at. And the ground floor. Now, there's limits to individual practice. There are people who understand the language, who understand the concepts, and they go over all the right material. And they're paying attention. But there's something that goes on. And that thing that goes on is that without others, yes, you can be a fundamentalist. It doesn't compromise that you're going straight to the fundamentals. But considering what other people have to say on the subject, it's like, whoa, I never noticed that before. Was it Imam Shafi who read the Quran 300 times? And even people have memorized it, and then somebody points out, doesn't this mean this? It's like, oh, dude, that does. Because there were three methods of how religious law came. Is just like in Kabbalah, you have the metaphor of of the clothes, the body, and the being itself. The clothes, the story, and all that, and the body is the commandments, and the innermost parts are the spirit of the law. You have the revelation, the inspiration, and then you have analogy and consensus. And that was the consensus was the thing that he didn't get, was the consensus. Oh yeah, the way of the believers. That makes sense. Pseudo groups. Going to be normal for a second here. Now, there's a lot of imitation out there. And one of the things that you really got to look at is falsehood in terms of what the lineage of where the group is. Kabbalah, much of it only occurs after Sufis were finding things related to Quran and sharing about that in works. And then you have it spread to Jewish mysticism. That's not saying a lot of things weren't happening at that time, like Merkabah mysticism, where they'd take a story and turn it into a vehicle for experience, which everybody can do with every scripture. It had been being done a long time. Same thing with the linguistic and symbolic analysis of this, that, and the other, even the point of looking at the very letters. But some stuff in particular, so they placed a falsehood in terms of when things were, that, it goes back to Abraham. Abraham's, it's like, admit Judaism is something that could be called Judaism 540 BCE. By then, you could say that, oh, yes, there was some sort of Judaism going on. And by Judaism, I mean Judaisms, because there were many types of Judaism. Some are very scriptural, some are more traditional, some are monotheistic, some are polytheistic. There's even satanic forms of Judaism. Some of them are parsis, some of them are exorcisms, satanic per se. I guess there could be satanic exorcism. So the car system, the devotee, those types of Satanism existed among the Jews, and there were Jewish traditions of that. Now, you wouldn't think of that as Judaism, but anyways, some of the traditions, particularly when it comes to Kabbalah, their real dates of origin is a really strong indicator that they are not what you're looking at. Everything being tied back to the tree, yes and no. And so again, idea about belief is going to vary some. But it can be seen as a tree of initiation. The Golden Dawn attributed their degrees to the tree of initiation, and I think I've already spoke about that in some videos in detail, but this is, being a Saturday and finishing up a Saturday. So that's an idea to have, is to actually structure the group upon something real, not just make it up as you go, like L. Ron Hubbard did. Student types. Just like I said with the path about people not being necessarily wrong or right, you can look at things through zodiac signs. You can look at things through psychological, the court cards of the tarot. You can look at things. There are very different ones. And drugs are typically not part of things, but there are Kabbalistic schools that involve themselves in drugs of all sorts, really. Some of them are justified, legalized drug use, like you have. But, looking at the things through the tree of life, you got, okay, some people are naturally at such and such, but does that mean that a Gebura type starting out is going to be a Gebura station in life? That's not necessarily the case. But some people are very advanced. That's why they're going into a path that you're going to want more. And they'll find more by re-going through the basics, even like other people did. And so tutor types. And again, the type of teacher varies, but you want a teacher that's going to be a step ahead of you. Like in the Enochian 16th author, we're looking at the author of the higher self, and there's, I guess, reason why I feel like I need to keep doing that one. And the synthesis. So there's a tact in interacting with people, a tact in working together the different types of the world. Okay, we're not going to be totally focused on the fire beings or the light beings or the ways that are okay to think of God, the manifestations, and so how did they all going to work together, and how the people going to work together? I asked series of questions of people, and it gets out more. I try to get out more answers than just I'm asking. But one of the things that occurs there is it helps me figure out how to respond to people. The starting points. So we're going to all start and end with the individual and their condition and their culture, and whether it's you or for another. That's got to be addressed, but let's not look at the idea of just simple, superiority, inferiority, unless we're saying, we have natural traits, and that's just fine. Contacts, and it's not easy to, particularly when you're looking at alternative religion, to find, okay, are we going to contact people online? Don't comment or question in my videos, whatever, but don't just contact me for personal attention. Same thing with any other public figure, particularly the larger ones. They have work to do for other people. But in daily life, when I go about, yeah, I'll talk to anybody and whatever. I don't just say, oh, no, I make videos, just watch my videos. That's not how you act in real life. But in terms of your public persona, yeah. But the right contacts can happen when the time is near. Now, don't introduce people to everything at once. Introduce them to what they think is ready. That doesn't mean that you become a Kahin and you restrict the access and like, well, you be open about the basics of the thing, but it's like sharing your dreams and all that other stuff may, become secondary. It's one thing to accept a prophet. It's another thing to accept people having their own experiences going on. And people ask questions, and please try to figure out their type of questions they're asking. And as that leader, as the tutor, be conscious of the speed and the intensity of which the teachings, experience, and practice need to be passed on. But let them relate to you. Don't make it some I'm in a higher position than you sort of thing. You got to be humble about it. And there comes the initiation. And in a way, I was initiated when I was 18 through my spiritual practices, and I've mentioned that. And other people, they make a change in their paradigm because of their experience. Others, it may be as part of a ritual. Some people, as simple as some people get shocked, when you're at a Sufi gathering or something. You're in the new guy. It's a chance for you to clean the floor or pass out some food, and it's like, okay. But for some people, it's a problem. I don't know why it's such a big deal. Being the new initiate, you gotta gotta put some work in. But there are various rituals. Some are complete shock. Some you know what's coming, but you still experience it completely different. So it's not needed to break oaths. Now, if you're exposing wrongdoing, you're exposing wrongdoing, but just don't go around breaking oaths. And people hear about initiations. It's like, you need to go in this room and you see this mirror and it's going to make you look fat. It's like, but if you don't know that, it's like, you have a little reaction. You go through the doors, and then then you're dreaming, and you remember, and you think, oh yes, I'm dreaming, and the circumstance. What is your circumstance? Do you have to continue the classic forms in order to convey? What is the mode in which things come through? Projection. Now, the eisegesis and the exegesis of the matter involves how, we're looking at some people can be thought of as gods or their position exalted. But fanaticism is when we're looking at a teacher as almost like the god, instead of the teaching, their habits, instead of what is the actual teaching, instead of their clothes and all that sort of stuff. Or the temple. There's people. Oh no, I'm not going to pray. It's like this room. This could actually be the only musalla for 10 miles or so. And, it's, are we only going to pray in a set house of worship? Even though I live near here? No, I'm going to do my timed rituals where they are. I can do things outside in different places. If you're stuck in a car, particularly in traffic, going to do it in traffic. There are better places to do things, but you do what you do, and you know the main thing is the practices, the what's going on inside you, not some particular place or person. You have inauguration. Now you can dedicate things, like with a masjid. One might say, have people read over the Quran in it. Some people, but 2 rakat, whether masjid or masala, they do a simple 2 rakat of prayer. 2 people gather together. That's it. There may never be communal prayer again there, but as long as it's treated as such a place, and that's the intention, and Kabbalistically, people could say Yahweh, Yahweh. Oh wait, Kadush, 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 Yahweh Tazbaut. I forgot the rest of the verse. They could say a particular round of names of God. They could go through the Kabbalistic tree, the Malkut, the foundation, the Yesud. Oh, the Malkut, the kingdom, the Yesud, the foundation, the Hod, the reverberation, the Netzah, the eternity, the Tiferet, the Tapara is really the right pronunciation, isn't it? The beauty, the Chesed, the mercy, the Geborah. Oh, the Geborah, the judgment, the Chesed, the mercy, the Da'at, the knowledge. Gate is probably a better translation of that in the biblical language. I prefer to use the biblical language than the Hebrew, which is really the medieval, the medieval thing. The binna, the understanding, the birth, the womb, the chukma, the wisdom. That is closer to knowledge than not. The keter or the crown, or they can work through all the trees and name all the paths and visualize stuff, and however you're going to initiate this center, that this is a place for it. Now you can do that for a place used once, or just some may read particular passages of scripture, or it can be simple or complex, whatever. And so the objectives, well, there's differences, and the differences of one person versus another is important to look at. But there should be general intentions. It's like a masjid has 5 pillars, but there's different types of people that go there. In Judaism, you could have, whatever your type of Judaism, you have set beliefs, and some people interpret some things differently, and that's fine. There's a difference in what happens early on, and the early meetings of a group can be different. But whether they're difficult and you got to get through them to get to the easier, funner, more developing sorts of parts, to or whether it's all exciting and new and then you're going on to something past the honeymoon stage. And once you know the people, it's like in my 1313 video, well, known and loved. But love is a practice, whether it's love of the tradition or whatever. So keep to it. The selection. Now, instabilities may arise as time goes on. So how are we going to deal with it? Well, there's the attracting and repelling aspect, the law of attraction and the law of repulsion, but not like the New Age sort of people may say. So you can limit the social stations of the group, because obviously, not even everybody can be the janitor, right? Although it's better for everybody to clean up after more than themselves. I've tried to live out that principle. Um, evil, evil in Kabbalah has grafted along a lot of Christian ideas with it, and entities from other groups that don't even match up in Hebrew, let alone Aramaic of the biblical period. So is Lucifer, is Hasathan the same as Hashathan? Is Lucifer the devil, or is Lucifer working for the devil, or is there the negative idea of thinking of Lucifer as a later Christian idea that kind of seeped in? Oh, the devil's not really the enemy. We're going to have to, so is the devil just something about descent, or does it play a role in ascent? Then we move on to a bit of theory. And again, it's important to look at the beliefs and the structures for themselves. The liquid, the air, the fire, the earth, seeing how things are, seeing how things are in terms of other things, and the scientific process is important to look at. Going further on, we have devotion. Now there's different, some people are, just, they're not even observant. Some people are observant, some people are religious, and of that are various intentions and seriousness of the matter. But instead of, the children of Israel, that can change from generation to generation. He who struggles for God. Ritual. So ritual is something done. Some rituals are made up. Some rituals have been revealed. The important thing is to do something right and do something that works. Relationships. So just like in a marriage, after you've gone past the love of the body and the love of the status and the love of the money, and gone into the character that has that has produced actually being in love, how is one dealing with this in terms of the group in different sorts? But does that mean, I'm going to be with this woman in the group, the one, these months, and the other, and then I'm going to move on to another one. Ooh, she's a new one. She's mine. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, it's, again, working for the path, working for the group as a whole, not I, me, mine. Star students. So people are going to make things a way of life. Some people aren't as serious. So people are going to naturally stand above in different ways. And I'm serious about what I do, and some of the things that are, they're on the table, but they're not, the main thing, or not even one of the main couple things or something. Sometimes I'll stand out in terms of that. But so there's the inner and outer of all that, and certainly in terms of a particular aspect of a path, somebody who stands out may not be the highest person in that regard, but whether you're aware of what's going on with someone or not aware of what's going on with someone, it's important that the advantages of the individual are brought out. The sacred space is built up by the practice. It's built up by building egregores, thought forms. But as I said before, this golden idea that seeped into the Golden Dawn from Kabbalah actually is once you build up your sacred space or your thought form or whatnot, leave it. Don't worry about the enemy coming in and dealing with it, or oh, you got to leave it super sacred. Don't let it permeate. No, let your sacred practices permeate the rest of your life, if possible. The action tree. Well, so the theory turns into practice here is that, yeah, we have all this Earth, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the sphere of stars. I don't know, the asteroids in between would be that. I don't know. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, in their respective positions, or whatever you're going to call it. These shouldn't just be things. They're types of actions, and work. You have your specialties, but work a little here, work a little there. The inner temple. Now, particularly when you don't have an outer temple to work with, or even if you do, the your psychological structures, you got to work with that. Work with visualization. Shut your eyes. Visualize a cube. The cube, it's a particular size. 3 times your height by 3 times your height, or by 3 times your height, or whatever. But you set up your idea of a temple. You can picture the Temple of Solomon as the Bible describes it. Maybe you want to picture the Temple of Herod as it probably once was. Sometimes you want to work out your concepts, and but whether you're working it that way or you're sanctifying the various parts of yourself, again, tying it back to the tree. Now, I've been to seminars both of a paid nature and an unpaid nature, and I enjoyed some. But the great thing about seminars versus sermons is that there is at least times for people to ask questions or interject with a comment. Or in the better ones, if the guy makes a mistake, you don't have to wait to the end. But that's done with tact. It's not like, well, what? And it's certainly not, my opinion's better than this opinion or whatnot. It's and then there's fellowship after such meetings, and some societies, that's how their worship meetings work completely. The gateway. Now there's a gateway technique. You leave a gap before your diagram, either psychologically or physically, and as a group or an individual, you have this gate before the thing, and it represents the going between. But again, this negative idea of Luciferian, because Luciferian is enlightening. But you want to develop an inner sort of teaching of yourself, and that's one of the goals of such a practice. But that doesn't mean that whatever comes to you is whatever you think it is. Oh, I'm visited by a prophet or an angel or whatnot, and well, the angel would be a jinn. It could be your own psychology that you think I have to be communicated with, and that's not necessarily the case. And obviously, that goes into the dangers, and you prepare for the dangers by looking at your experiences. You look at the possible experiences and prepare for them. You prepare your beliefs and practices so you can't be influenced by certain crises or certain shocks of experience. Oh, I've already talked about crises, and personal problems in one's life can definitely either make the practice hard or make it make a person want to change. But when one can't do hours and hours of reading and meditating and all that, keep an inner reflection. Yes, I've got my work to do, and I'm doing this, or I don't have the ability to hold a book that long, and or or whatever it is. Try to keep something basic, and that will maintain one. Um, the reputation. Now, the pelvic center, symbolic of family and all that, becomes the center of reputation, and a mystical schools is supposed to support and train an individual to have a good reputation, both in terms of the school and in greater society. But does that mean the person compromises? Not necessarily. The organization, as time goes on, the way of organizing the group may, change over time, or they could divide. The Baha'i have an ideal of having 9 members, and then they branch off into another group and another group and another group. But particularly pricing of buildings, it's not like, here's a couple $100. We're going to build a shed on this guy's property, and that takes care of the group. It doesn't work like that anymore. And it's not like you can just clear some trees out in the woods and build a house. So who leads? They got to do something. They got to stay one step ahead of the group, and things can change over time. I'm sorry. I'm trying to ad lib a 56-part thing here. The dull times. Now, you're not going to necessarily notice all the experiences and the developments and the learning that's going to happen, but it's happening on some level. We're learning and experiencing, and if you push past those points, you end up experiencing more often. You end up learning more often. But you push past the points with devotion. The bhakti yogi goes further than the jnana yogi or the karma yogi. The surface. Now, St. Paul talked in terms of debt and atonement versus the ignorance and enlightenment that most spiritual paths talk about, and whether one has been forgiven and whatnot, but you still got to make things right with society for your past, or you feel indebted to the group, but don't let that be some sociopathic sort of thing that drags you under. But the service, sometimes you show up to the meeting for someone else. I was at a Shadliya conference, and someone brought up, different people brought up that they had a certain level of experience at different points. And one guy just said, well, that's why we're all here, because one person is going to have a certain degree of experience that time. It may not be me, may not be you, but, it's the collective that makes it happen. And of course, the collective, science has shown that when people pray or meditate or even secularly think, which for some reason doesn't have the effect doing the same thing as something with a spiritual context, but the level of energy or the magnetic sort of difference in the room is greater than any one of them, than each of them are ever going to do by themselves. So the ordination. Now, I don't believe in ordinated priestly class, but degrees of, hey, this person has learned this scripture, this person has gained this understanding. It's important to have degrees and licenses in secular traditions as much as it is to do such in spiritual traditions. The schools, a wider society. Uh, you know, people can look at the schools as focusing on any particular scholar or mystic and how they look at things, or in this particular area, how things are run there, and you end up with your introductory courses. Just as I said before, it can vary per individual and group how you're going to run the introduction. And you don't really know when you talk to people how you're going to introduce the subject of spirituality or a paradigm shift. But just a little bit of change. And if you can't get that, a little bit of change in belief or practice for the better, that if you can't bring that out, at least, find agreements. But don't just introduce it in a way that, these interfaith gatherings where we're all the same, and it's like you go to these meetings at least yearly, if not more than yearly, for a decade, and you don't realize how any path is really different than your own. And you go beyond that, people. And the production and the OTO, the OTO, you want to build a legacy. And in terms of teaching, yeah, leave a diary, your spiritual diary, or your magical journal, or write a grimoire, even for yourself. Leave it behind for your family as trusted or something. Produce something. Produce a didactic piece of art. Sometimes you just retreat. Sometimes you just gotta leave the school behind, and be part of yourself. But even if you're going to a house of worship 3 times a day, 5 times a day, 7 times a day, and you're even staying for an hour apiece, I mean, how can that be done in the modern age? But if you're doing this, leave something for your home. Leave something in between there and your home. Leave something for what you do on work. The Sufis, one of the things that resulted in Sufism is the men's and women would do their work, and they'd have systems of remembrance and stuff that they did there. But sometimes you retreat, staying in one place. A conference. Now, how does this differ between a seminar and, I don't know, the Invisible College? Yes, I mentioned the Invisible College, didn't I? In terms of Dr. John Dee, and they did stuff publicly, and so you want to figure out a way to be able to display your spiritual path, not to show off, but to bring people who aren't involved in, and but keeping things controlled. Okay, next chapter, building the temple. There's building in terms of the traditions and what's not traditional, and you can, you want to bring in the spiritual presence of whatever you're doing. When you're involving other people and other beings, you want to establish their spot. Not everybody rushes into the temple and, I got the seat, I got the main seat. It doesn't work like that way. Networking. Well, in more universal schools like the Freemasons, or the group that branched off them and ended up dying, the Illuminati, or the OTO, or sometimes it's not about taking Crowley as a prophet or Theodore Roos or any of that. It's a social networking of, hey, we're going to work through some ideas together, but it's not really a religion, but there's the social networking. But some people see it as a way to, we're going to, because there are spirits of the place. there are angels that can particularly hang out at a place, and the only way to experiencing them is to go into one group. But does that mean you have to bounce around forever? Like this one Sufi I read about that he had, was it like 136 different licenses as being a member of that many different Sufi orders when he died? But there can be benefit to that. I wouldn't be opposed to, going around, joining a group, becoming a little bit adapt to the extra practices of that group, and then joining another and joining another, as long as my self was taken care of. And, if I, family, they have their rights. Hierarchy. And how does the spiritual and the physical hierarchy work? And are we having a white lodge or a black lodge? Or they're different circles? I was initiated in my New Age religion playlist. I intend to share about how I was initiated into the second circle of a group, given a particular word. But does that mean, as I was saying, different levels? There's a lot of not understanding too well in the sixth and seventh circles, and even the eighth circle, completely missing out on some stuff that it turns out the international level that this guy has reached himself on recently, this guy and his wife, of course, because it's important to bring in the spouses sometimes in these orders as being of the same rank, because, obviously, if you would hear stuff, it's very hard to say, oh, well, you're international level, and the wife doesn't even have, it's just minimal local ability as far as her station. It doesn't work that way. A man and wife are, they should uplift each other to whatever position the one is versus the other. And the timing. Things are gonna, sometimes you just got, you have one moment, and if you hesitate, it's gone. But typically, it doesn't work like that. And what comes is what one needs. But yeah, don't hesitate if something seems like the right moment. And the technology is definitely going to change the as time goes on, how something comes about, and why should a god have said, don't do all these things, and I never thought about that. Humanity knows better, but then they go on to and that's sort of where destiny comes in, is choices into habits, and a character, and a destiny. And societies have their opportunity, being ruled by despots and all sorts of stuff. Well, at some point, it didn't have to delineate into that. Blossom and decline. So, in terms of our ability to think and feel and experience, there can be an ascent and a descent. Maintain your spiritual stations. And some people are going to be a fifth columnist. And they will work to change the group, consciously change the group. But is that, necessarily some sort of malicious thing? No, it doesn't have to be malicious at all. It could be the best thing. But the group could be reborn. And the reference to Christianity is used, that, Judaism was dying out as something being a powerful movement, and Christianity rose to be the most powerful faith in the world in terms of the material world. So out of the Old Testament comes the New Testament, as they thought, even though a lot of twist had to be made to do that. Let's be normal in terms of the epilogue. What teaching comes out? What have we glimpsed? Have we gone into the broad way, or the specific, or the specifics? I was going to say Pacific. Is it one person who's in line? If you're going to be in line, whatever. Do it for that. Don't worry about the other people. Or is it going to be a whole thing? Are different classes of society going to have to work separately? But realize it's all about your becoming and the becoming of others. Do your rights. Do the rights of others. And to remind you, silver can be said to be the metal of fall, the fall quarter. And for the cooling quarter, we can, this sodalite and the Merkaba, basically, we have two tetrahedrons woven together, which gives you even more than 8 sides. Because see, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 sides. 8 sides. And so 4. So 20 sides, I think. And my mood ring, which you can practice with mood ring and allow for those shifts. And that's what a spiritual path can do, as far as doing the right things and believing the right things. You can practice with certain experiences, making it turn towards black and red and green and yellow and blue and over into indigo again. I don't know if you can see that, but Shalom Aleichem.